One entrepreneur's reputation is very, very important. And once you lose, it's like a crystal vase. And once it's broken, you can't get it back. If you look at the whole academic system that we have, we wanted to create people who are good employees. So the way I adopt it is cut it into 40-40-20. 40% comes from their daily logs. The second 40% is when I give them assignments to do. The last one to me is irrelevant, 20%. It's an open textbook. Your learning is your responsibility. I'm not interested in teaching people who don't want to learn.
It's crazy to know that somebody's seen 60 plus countries. I want you to tell the young generation how important traveling is.
I said every travel made me smaller and bigger. Because let's face it, this generation is a generation that's they're entitled.
Welcome to Insights at Midas. Today is going to be with a coach, an inspiration, and of course, the pioneering person who has been a part of Midas for the last 11 years, Professor Nellooli Rajsekharan, whose insights vary from so many subjects. He's a man who's traveled more than 60 plus countries, and he's inspired so many entrepreneurs and leaders at Midas. I hope you enjoy this podcast that I've hosted with Nellooli Rajsekharan. So, sir, I wanted to ask you that how does entrepreneurship as a subject at Midas really different from all the MBA institutes that we're talking about? First one is how is it different academically?
Okay, interesting question. I've been struggling with this question. As you know, I've been teaching MBA students as well. Now, take the same subject. I've been teaching power and politics at an institution I don't want to name, and I'm doing the same program here. How is it different?
Right.
For an MBA student, they have the academic bent. The design is such that I can give them a lot of case studies, give them a lot of materials to read, assignments to do, because their frame of mind is such, and academically they're selected in such a manner that they're chasing academic pursuits. Even if they go to do business tomorrow, honestly, their learning does not equip them to do that.
Correct.
Because academically, they might be very good, but it does not give you the practical skills to do with it, which they have to learn again after you join an organization. I've been recruiting thousands of MBAs, and they have to go through that process.
Correct.
Now, whereas if you come to teaching the same subject at Midas, for example, there are two issues. One, some of them are dropouts, they have no academic bent, and some of them, even though they may have completed some basic degree, they have no interest in pursuing that. They also don't read as much as the MBA students do. That's not their interest. Not that they can't, they won't. The second part is they are looking at more of adult learning principles. Now, when you look at adult learning, why do adults learn? The first thing is that they want to learn to apply. I'm not learning for learning's sake unless I'm doing something on my hobby side like music or dancing or something. Other than that, I'm learning to apply it. So that is the first principle. The second principle is that I'm not a blank slate. When I come to these programs, some of them come from business families, some of them come from the intense desire to start something new. So their whole objective is to do something, not to increase their knowledge.
Correct.
So from that perspective, you have to give it to them in those kind of formats, where their attention span is low and their preference is for more activity-based learning. So the whole content has to be reshaped into bite-sized pieces, when I say that.
Yes.
And they have to be, even if you're eating an elephant, you have to make them elephant burgers. So over a period of time, they don't, even without recognizing, they would have learned the subject, but I would say, in a concealed manner.
Correct.
Because they're going through activities and learning it from those activities. So that's the second big difference between MBA and this. And the third thing, which is, I know it's controversial, but I'm going to say that, is that if you look at the whole academic system that we have, which was fashioned around the British education system, we wanted to create people who are good employees. So, what are the values that you consider important in a traditional education system?
Correct.
One is memory. You're given a question, you're given an answer, and then you have to just learn that answer and reproduce it. So, what are you testing? Primarily memory.
Correct.
Yeah. And the second part is you're taught things more like obedience, consistency with what you're being taught, not to challenge or question. In today's world, it's irrelevant. The world around you is changing so fast.
Correct.
Now, Donald Trump coming on the scene is going to change the whole world. We don't know how. So, if you are getting stuck in your thinking and you're going to comply with whoever else is telling you, that won't work anymore.
Correct.
So, I think the design of the education system itself, it's a separate subject. I'm not going there. But I honestly believe it has to change. So, MBA in the current format, I know even Harvard is relooking at the whole concept. They're redesigning. Everyone is redesigning. So, I think those who want to go for entrepreneurship or those who want to do something on their own need to go through programs like this.
Correct.
And MBA will not give any help to them. So that's the important part academically. There's one more thing I would like to say is that subject like power and politics, for example, is never taught in universities. But you look at how many times people fail in organizations, not because they are technically bad, technically poor, but many of them have this fallacy that most of these solutions to their problems are professional. They are not. You look at it, your political skills, ability to manage people, influence people, manage things. You're an entrepreneur.
Yes,
you know
sir.
this.
Yes, sir.
The technical degree is not going to help you to manage an institution either. It's coming to that stage. Employees want more freedom, employees want more space for themselves, and they want to have a say in how things are done.
Absolutely.
And those are not technical issues. Those are clear power and political issues. And how do you manage that?
Correct.
So I think those are some of the major differences between MBA and entrepreneurship programs. I see it.
Yes. And so, like, whilst you were saying it, when I was thinking about power and politics, and if I were to think about myself, say, a leader at Midas, the only thing I'm probably doing is managing people.
Yeah.
And if I learn the art of managing people, I think my organization will end up doing well because everybody knows what they're supposed to do. I love the word, the freedom that you talked about. They hate it when you're trying to micromanage them. And that's what's probably changed over the years.
Yeah.
So please also talk about what you said to me yesterday about how a family business dynamic in a leadership format, how the father talks about, um, choosing loyalty over the skills,
Yeah.
and how the young generation is looking at the other way around. So I would love to hear that part about from you.
Sure. Thank you. That again is an important area, particularly for India. I wouldn't say only for India, some of the South Asian businesses. Because most businesses in India, definitely, and in parts of Asia, including China, many of them are family businesses. Look at any successful business in India today, the biggest ones are all family businesses. Some of the middle ones are also family businesses, and the small ones are also family businesses. So, the difference in a family business is that there is a lot more possessiveness about it by few people. Whereas if you have a large number of shareholders in a company, it's very impersonal. I put some money into a company, I don't know what's happening there, I don't even care honestly.
Correct.
As long as I can see that things are going in the right direction, I'm getting some dividends, the stock value is going up, that's fine. It's not that, it's personal. So when it comes to that, see, over and above the traditional leadership styles that we teach, all of us teach in management, I have created a new kind of management style or leadership style, which is, I call it patriarchal or matriarchal, depending on it's a man or a woman. Where what happens is, if you simplify it, all I'm saying is, I'll take care of you and you take care of the business. So, in one line, you can define it saying, I'll take care of you, including all your personal needs, etc., and you take care of the business.
Correct.
So, that relationship transcends an official relationship. That relationship is much more depth and it's much more intense and it's probably much more personal.
Yes.
Than an official relationship.
Correct.
In an official sense, I wouldn't get involved in organizing your daughter's marriage or son's requirements for education or anything. I don't, because there are policies to take care of them. Here it's not that.
Yes.
And there will be a core group of people who would have traveled, been part of this journey of the person who built a business, and they are intimate part of the family.
Yes.
And the other thing is they also don't go by levels. It may be a driver who has been with you for a long time. It may be an accounts person who has been with you for a long time. And they develop such bonds, which is a little difficult for the next generation to either understand or appreciate or to retain. Three levels there.
Correct.
But it will be very difficult to fight against that with somebody who has built that business on on a particular model. So the whole issue of affiliation and association and personal commitments are quite different compared to the Western models in Indian family businesses.
Correct.
And that also creates a problem in terms of entry of new people into the business. I can see as a youngster, for example, that my father's driver is not probably the most efficient person, but I won't be able to get rid of him,
Correct.
and I don't have to. But that's a business he has built, and he has his own terms and conditions. He has built it his own way. So making those accommodations, adjustments, and somehow sort of bring the whole thing together is going to be a challenge for the new generation, not for the old one.
Correct.
So I think this is where one needs to recognize that we need different models for our businesses in India. And most of the businesses are family businesses. Let's face it. And without addressing that, we cannot address Indian business.
Correct. So one more question I had was that we don't have exams at Midas, so we are not basically judging them basis their marks. So what's your take on this whole concept of having no exams, but obviously having a mechanism to evaluate them as a coach?
Interesting you say that. The last session I did with your team was exactly that.
Right.
The new group of participants. So the way I adopt it is I cut it into 40, 40, 20. 40% comes from their daily logs, because I want them to write very, very briefly what they learned today. There's no word limits on that, but it has to be posted by midnight today. And whatever they learn from my classes or my sessions or whatever, two things are important. So, what do they find interesting or useful from that? Secondly, how do they think they can use it in their own business? Two questions. And on a daily basis, they have to write this.
Correct.
Because that's their own learning. It's not for marks. But then I'm evaluating them based on what they already do for their own learning. It's not additional work for them.
I agree.
So I score them. That gives about 40% weightage for the overall program. The second 40% is when I give them assignments to do. Now, let's say it's a negotiation case, or it's going to be an exercise in conflict resolution. I'm not looking at which team did better than the other, or who became successful, who failed. Because sometimes the team that failed has higher learning than the one that succeeded.
True.
So what I'm looking at again, what is the personal learning coming out of it? And what would they do differently the next time they do it? So that's a real mark of something. That's all we can do.
Absolutely.
We have all made mistakes in life.
Correct.
So what can anyone do from that? It's to say that what did I learn from this, and how can I do something different next time? Those two questions are posed at the end of each program.
Okay.
And I evaluate them. The last one to me is irrelevant, 20%, where again it's an open textbook.
Okay.
They can use any of my presentations books, everything. But the questions are framed in such a way that they cannot copy it. They can use what's in the book to address and solve a particular problem, which most of the times comes from their own businesses.
Got it.
So that's the way I handle it. I'm not saying there are many ways of handling it, but that's the way I handle it, and so far I found it effective.
So, do you think you can honestly judge a student through marks? I mean, how the way the traditional education system has been functioning?
It depends on what you think education is for.
Correct.
See, in education, if you treat it as pure knowledge transfer, you don't know physics, I'm going to teach you physics. I can test it.
Yes.
And you can very effectively check, saying that, okay, this person now knows the basics of physics or whatever level you've defined. But giving more knowledge does not change behavior.
Yes.
Everybody knows about HIV/AIDS, everyone knows about the perils of smoking. But giving more knowledge, does it stop them from smoking?
No, sir.
So what we want, if we what we want is action out of it. If what we want out of education is for people to do real things in life,
Mm-hmm.
knowledge transfer is only one piece.
So, sir, coming to, in fact, just picking it up from where you're saying this, is Midas really focusing on the entire experiential learning bit of it, giving them a lot of practical knowledge of the real world, and what, in your view, is how does that teaching really go forward in life when you're actually experiencing your learnings?
You have to see it in the larger context.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at how India has changed, I'll take from India, but it's true of other countries as well. How India has changed, India is actively promoting entrepreneurship. And the new generation is also not very keen to go and work for another company. At least some of them, quite a large number now, is increasing. So if that is your intention, then your experience learning is more important than your academic learning.
Mm-hmm.
Because if this country is trying to build entrepreneurs, for example, where is Make in India, take any of those programs. If we want to be independent and we want to create products and services and to compete with the rest of the world, then you can't be employees. You can't build all employees. I'm saying, okay, still there is a role for that. I'm not saying. So traditional education will have to shrink
Mm-hmm.
to the role of providing employees or
Correct.
people who are more working for other people.
Right.
And those who want to create enterprises, products, services, then those people have to come and work for these people.
Hmm.
So who do you want to build? Ultimately, that's a question to me. But to me, the higher value is in building people who can create value.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm associating with Midas, honestly.
Correct.
And I've stopped teaching MBA programs.
Yes. And so that's
Not to discredit what I'm saying. I believe the role is more here.
I
The
understand.
value addition I can do is more here.
So, do you believe you're creating leaders of tomorrow for this country?
Yes, of course, there's a lot happening today. But I was telling the team here today, the participants, it takes two to tango.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, there's a little more discipline required, a little more intensity required. Because let's face it, this generation is a generation that's lucky. They're entitled.
Hmm.
And they're getting a lot more things which some of us never got. We didn't have the resources. So you can see it in two ways. One is, oh, I have all the resources, I can sit back with my feet up and relax, or take it easy. But the other is to say, I have inherited a million, how can I make it 20 million?
Yes.
So this 1 million came to you with no effort.
Hmm.
You're just lucky, you were born in this family, so you get this business.
Correct.
You can run it down in no time. Take Enron, I was giving that example today. The same year, where they declared 100 billion turnover or something, they declared bankruptcy. 1 year. So what does it take? I said, none of these businesses are as big as that. So such a big business can go down in such a short period of time. You're vulnerable.
Hmm.
So no matter how big your business you're inheriting from somebody, it gives you no stability, it gives you no security. And if you are a fool and you don't know what you're doing, you can run it down in no time.
Correct.
So that's one of the reluctances also, I must say, when the older generation entrepreneurs find it a little difficult to hand over to the next generation.
Yes.
So today I was telling them, you prove you deserve it.
Hmm.
The new generation, I come on time, I do things on time, I deliver, I don't forget things, and I make sure objectives are met. The day I'm a father as well. The day my son says I can do this, I'll give it to him happily.
Hmm.
Because these are things they have built with a lot of difficulties. And they won't just part with it
Correct.
unless they feel there's a point at which their party is ready to take over. And you look at the big businesses like Tata's, for example.
Yes.
From where they took, they've always gone higher and higher. Whereas how many businesses have just gone down, disappeared?
Correct.
They were big at one time.
So, you have to prove your worthiness to the
It's
business.
a two-way street. Sometimes, of course, there's a problem with the previous generation. They don't want to let go.
Hmm.
So that's another issue we need to deal with. But let's look at it from the positive side of it. As a youngster, what can you do today? Deserve it. You deserve to take over. And that comes from hard work.
Correct.
And so there's no question of being entitled these days, because even if you're the owner of any company, you're vulnerable
Correct.
unless you can manage it.
So one more question was that the Gen Zs are really in this. Everybody is making this conversation about them that it's very difficult to work with them. A lot of people are finding it difficult to even hire them and make them work in their system. It's very easy for them to say no. It's very important for them to have their space, their freedom, all of that. How do you think it has been probably teaching the Gen Zs now?
I don't know, either I'm lucky or something I do works.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't had problems this way. Partly because you also have to be firm, you have to be firm.
Mm-hmm.
If a class starts at 10 o'clock, if it starts at 10 o'clock, I just say the train leaves. Now, whether you are there or not, it's not my business. And I don't do teaching programs, I do learning programs. So today I was asking them, who's responsible here for the learning? I'm not. I'll get paid whatever I do. If I do it free also, I don't have to worry about it. Your learning is your responsibility.
Correct.
And if you don't want to learn, be my guest. Don't come to my class. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in teaching people who don't want to learn.
Hmm.
But put the challenge. I think ultimately everyone likes a challenge.
Yes.
And time, for example, I said, do you think your banker will wait for you if you're late? Do you think your financial will wait for you? Do you think your customer will wait for you? Do you think your shareholders will wait for you? Nobody is going to wait for you. So it's not for me. What I'm trying to give you is a discipline which is required, essential for your survival.
Yes.
Because nobody is going to wait for you. The train will leave. So simple things like that, which brings across. And I said, maybe your father doesn't trust you because you're not an entrepreneur. Maybe very simple thing.
Hmm.
How do you trust somebody who does not meet the commitments? And the other part, you talked about flexibility. It's also important. I said, if you want a particular day, you have some issues, you want to start half an hour late, let's negotiate. If I agree, I can easily agree to you saying instead of 10:30, we start at 11. But 11 is 11.
Yes.
So get the commitments, make them part of the decision making, and once that is done, there is no compromise.
Got it.
It seems to work.
So there are three very interesting subjects that you take at Midas. One is negotiation skills, second is power and politics, and the third one is talent management. Um, all of them center around people, center around dynamics, and I know that it's one of the most loved sessions on campus. And having you here is almost like the kids are going to be taken care of and they're going to learn a lot. They're going to celebrate what they're learning as well. So I wanted to understand, what does these three subjects or modules contribute in the entrepreneurial journey of a student?
It's a long answer, but I'll make it as short as possible. I'll take one by one.
Sure.
It's an interesting question. Many people have asked me. If you look at entrepreneurial leadership,
Hmm.
it's not like corporate leadership. The big distinction is that in a corporate leadership, you become a CEO, you become a managing director, somebody is giving you the authority, right? A board of directors gives you the authority to the MD, or MD gives it to the GM, or GM gives it to the director of HR. You have done nothing to earn that authority. You have not synthesized that power. Not
Right.
authority is the wrong word, power.
Hmm.
Whereas an entrepreneur, sometimes you don't have enough money to do things, and you have to create your own power base, and you have to create your own set of people who will follow you.
Hmm.
This model of leadership is much closer to political leadership.
True.
Even if you're a corner politician doing simple things on a street corner, you have to sell an idea to some people, get them to agree with you, let, let them to join you. That's how you synthesize power out of people. It's the same. And unfortunately, people don't see that. And as an entrepreneur, you think this is your product, and with this product, everybody is going to come and buy this. No.
Hmm.
Maybe the best mousetrap,
Hmm.
but it won't sell. And you also need the people to work with you, and sometimes you don't have the money to pay them.
Correct.
So, how do you get them on board? How do you get them to believe in what you're doing? It's very close to political leadership. So, the model that I'm using is much, much closer to political leadership, where you can influence people, you can get them to do what you want, and that's your power. If you don't have that as an entrepreneur, I mean, you're an entrepreneur. If you cannot influence people, and if you cannot convince people,
Yes, sir.
you cannot communicate with people, and you cannot connect with people, you're out of business.
Absolutely.
Whereas in a corporate world, you can actually fall back on a lot more of formal power.
Hmm.
Here it's informal power. So one module. I'm taking a little long to say this
No, no,
because I need
sir.
to
Take your
take you
time.
through that. So that's power and politics. When it comes to talent management, today the war for talent is very high. It's a sad situation because everybody wants the top 20% people. There's a lot of people nobody wants.
Correct.
So the whole chase is for talent, and it's for the best talent available in the market.
Hmm.
We do recruitment with my partners in Ireland. We do recruitment for very, very senior people, CEOs, board of directors, CXOs. The turnover is very high. Post
Hmm.
COVID, it almost has 40%.
Wow.
So you cannot imagine if 40% of your senior people leave, you can't manage an organization.
Hmm.
So one of the mistakes again, or the lack of understanding of entrepreneurs, is that I don't know anything about human resources. I'll recruit an HR director, or if I don't know something about finance. Hire a finance director. Fine, they'll do their job, but when they bring you options, if you don't have an understanding enough to make sensible decisions or choices, then you're not running the show.
Correct.
So the finance director will run the show, or HR person will run the show. So understanding the whole overall management of talent in one sense, and understanding the basics of these particular functions within an organization is on one level important. On the second level, today talent is available in many forms.
Hmm.
And again, you will know this. Creating a lot of people as permanent employees is not the option. It's not viable today.
Correct.
So, if you want to manage an organization, the way I go about this is to split the requirements to run a business into its components like competencies.
Hmm.
Then what happens? They're not equal to people because
Correct.
one person can have multiple competencies, or for one competency, you may need different
Two
people.
people. Yeah.
And then you can source it from anywhere.
Hmm.
Like your payroll is a function that you need to manage. But do you have to have your own payroll people? Today there are hundreds of organizations which manage payroll. Your public relations, your advertising. So the healthy balancing between managing your own resources to manage these versus outsourcing
Hmm.
comes from a deep understanding of talent management. What do you need to manage this business? And then I can get those resources from very different sources.
Correct.
So otherwise, if you don't know anything, like if your only tool you have is a hammer, then you
Hmm.
treat everything like a nail.
Hmm.
The more tools you have, then you see, okay, I can do this here, I can get this here, I can outsource this here, or I can contract it here. And that comes from a deep understanding of your talent requirements of an organization.
Correct.
Negotiation skills is a no-brainer. We are negotiating every day with somebody or the other, including our kids, neighbors, everybody. And unfortunately, again, it's not one of those subjects very strongly taught in organizations.
Correct.
So I find that's one of the most interesting programs.
I agree because there's a lot of noise on campus. Everybody is arguing and trying to sort of win an argument. And I've always, heard and understood that they've got to the core of learning real negotiation. Uh, I've also understood, sir, the way you sort of have lined up the courses. What happens is they just weave into each other. So by the time they're actually doing the negotiation bit, they've understood people. They've far beyond understood what they are good at saying and how the other person may respond if that's coming. So what I've learned over the years with you is the kid is ready to start negotiating by the time he gets there, and that probably really changes his perspective of learning altogether because he's experienced enough and has the confidence to negotiate and also win that sort of and I'll never forget what every kid every year has come out and said. Sir has always told us to come to a win-win. So it has to be a win for both parties, and both should be happy leaving that negotiation. And I think that makes so much sense. Life in general, that whatever you do in life should be a win-win for
It does,
both.
it does. Now I make a distinction there to say you have transactional negotiations, like you're a tourist.
Hmm.
You go to Pattaya beach or something, you're buying something like a memento, something to take home. You're not going to meet that person anymore. You haggle, it's not negotiation.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, haggling is different from negotiation.
Correct.
Make a distinction. So it's transactional. You never see this person, that person never see you. So he says $100, I start from $5, $10. It's pretty ridiculous. You
Hmm.
end somewhere, nobody knows who won or who lost. But most things in life are not like that.
Hmm.
If you're a new entrepreneur coming on the scene, you're negotiating with a supplier.
Yeah.
You need stability of that supplier.
Hmm.
This negotiation is only one transaction. If you somehow manage to get the lowest price from him and he is going to lose money on that, it's not sustainable.
Hmm.
So ultimately, it's going to affect your own business.
Correct.
So building those relationships and the sense of being fair from both sides is important for that relationship. So I don't teach haggling.
Hmm.
I said, how do you get the best value out of a negotiation? Making sure that the other person feels it's sustainable, it's a fair deal, and I want to continue to work with these people.
Correct.
If not, it's a short-term deal.
Correct.
And the second point is that if you do that to one supplier, word gets around in the market.
Hmm.
Because one entrepreneur's reputation is very, very important.
Absolutely.
And once you lose, it's like a crystal vase. Once it's broken, you can't put it back.
And they don't come back to you.
Trust is very difficult to put back. So I teach principal negotiations.
Hmm.
That's
Okay,
slightly different from haggling.
True. So, sir, my final question was a personal one. I know that you've you're probably the only person who I know has seen the world. You know, when they say that you've seen the world, I probably would say only Raj sir has really seen the world. So, can I please get the number again?
About
How many countries you visited?
I haven't counted, it's more than 60 years.
So he's, it's crazy to know that somebody's seen 60 plus countries. And uh, so I want you to tell the young generation how important traveling is
Sure.
and what it brings on the table.
In one of my books, I write as well. In one of my novels, I've used this sentence, I've quoted. I said, every travel made me smaller and bigger.
Hmm.
So it's a very important sentence for me because every time you travel, you find things much bigger than you.
True.
And it gives you a sense of, okay, it's still a long way to go. It makes you smaller in one sense.
Correct.
And every journey also adds to you.
Hmm.
So you're not the same person after a journey when you come back. Something has been added to you, so you become bigger also.
Correct.
So I say that every journey makes you smaller and bigger.
Beautiful, sir.
Today, I realize that Midas is a very special place because of its coaches, 100%, but especially because of Raj sir. He brings in so much value to each entrepreneur at Midas. His subjects, right from negotiation skills, talent management, and power and politics, are subjects that are of so much value. I hope you enjoyed our podcast today. Stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, and keep watching our coming podcasts as we're getting more and more interesting.